And welcome to Recovery Report Live. I'm Dan Odess, president of GlobalPro, where we manage risk to recovery, and we've managed more than $1 billion in recovery and the placement of thousands of insurance policies. We want to make sure that you have the information you can use. That's what this show is always about. Every single Thursday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, we go live to talk about important issues that impact you as policyholders, business owners, community association managers, or board members. So make sure you continue to tune in. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, like us, and follow us on all the social media channels so that you get that notification when we go live. Well, there's a lot of activity going on in Florida right now, and I'm going to focus this broadcast on it. But if you're tuning in from somewhere else outside of South Florida or the Florida region that's been dramatically impacted by these recent storm activity, whether it's hail and flooding and torrential downpours, tornadoes as well, honestly, you can always learn something, because in our situations, as we are trying to pick up and recover in the South Florida region, we're going to be dealing with insurance companies and their latest tactics to delay your payments and also the latest tactics and how they're adjusting claims. So we want to make sure that you have the latest information for how you navigate those things, particularly if you've been impacted by flooding, hail, and tornado. Because right now, a lot of you have suffered damages to your buildings, whether it's your business or your community association, and we want to make sure, again, that you have the information you can use. So let's talk about the flooding. Now, the big story that broke on the flooding was obviously the traumatic loss of our supply chain when it comes to gas, right? We had huge backups. We had a slowdown in the actual traffic and transit that was going around. We had this nervous sense. We had this panic buying that was going on. It's a little bit questionable as to why exactly we had a shortage in gas. Well, because when I reached out to my local network of people that I trust and talk with on a regular basis, and I asked them about what they're doing to deal with this latest issue regarding the gas, no one was really panicking. But in the news and the media and social media, you heard about the panic buying, and there were some videos of people filling up 2-liter bottles and other things they should not be using to tote around gasoline. Certainly not a good, safe practice and procedure. But what really did hit me was that in all the years, I've represented dozens of gas stations that have suffered major damages, and I know that they don't get gas deliveries on a daily basis. So when I heard about the gas shortage within 48 hours, 72 hours after this major flooding event, I scratched my head a bit about it as I drove around and saw gas stations closed, claiming they had no gas. Again, it fueled this story, this idea of panic buying, but it also, of course, hurt our community. It slowed down the transit in our community, and it also took our attention away from our families, our businesses, our communities, and what we can do to help and get back to business as usual, right? Because you're wondering whether or not you have enough gas to get to work. You're wondering, as a contractor, whether or not you can actually provide services in certain areas because of the distance you need to drive. These all things have such a negative impact and slow down our recovery process. So I think people need to stop and think about things. It's just a little bit more as to whether or not they actually, needed the gas at the time that they lined up or queued up to get the gas, and also whether or not there was actually truly a crisis in your area. And so, again, I think people need to relax a little bit. If you had the half a tank of gas, I'm sure it was going to be enough to get you through the next few days, and you probably don't routinely fill up as much as we saw people filling up on their way to either work or to and from work or their home. So I know, well, moving on from that topic and actually looking at the insurance issues that we were seeing are, first off, it was confusing, right? You had your major flooding event that occurred, and then several days later, you actually had an emergency order signed by the actual Florida governor. However, you did have emergency order signed by local administrators and legislators that were claiming that there was an emergency issue at that time or needed resources. And so the timing of those orders leads to some confusion as it relates to making claims. Because under certain state of emergencies signed into place by the governor, there's certain additional guidelines or things you need to do, whether you're a public adjuster or even a policyholder. And also, what does that mean to your claims or the resources that are available to those that are helping you with your claims? So, and again, the governor's order is truly what matters. And the timing of it, though, is, again, a point of confusion. for particularly public adjusters where certain laws are in place related to the restrictions on fees or what they can charge when the governor's order is signed, as opposed to when the real flooding occurred. The real flooding occurred earlier than the governor's order. There was at least 2 days that went by before the governor signed an order. And in that order, he said that the local authorities, although that they did not seek the state's help or help with recovery efforts, he was signing his order because obviously the dire situation and the need for assistance in the area. But it kind of conflicted with the orders that were already in place by our local authorities, particularly in the Fort Lauderdale area. What does that all mean to you? Well, again, pay particularly close attention to these claims and the date in which the actual loss occurred. It's really important when you make notice of your claim, and if you haven't done it already, did you sustain flooding damages earlier than the governor's order or when the governor's order happened? And why that may be important is that we may see the federal government extend the period of time for you to submit a sworn statement and proof of loss. And it's important that you know that if you did suffer flood damages pursuant to the policy and laws currently in place, outside of any sort of extension by the federal government, you have 60 days to make a full and complete claim and submit a sworn statement and proof of loss, even if one is not asked for, even if the insurance company representative or adjusters aren't finished adjusting your claim, even if you haven't received payment, an estimate, or anything from your flood insurer or its adjuster, you still, as a policyholder, have the obligation to submit your evaluation of your loss and a sworn statement and proof of loss. And if you don't, you give up any sort of entitlements to any sort of recovery that you may otherwise have been entitled to, even if your flood adjuster hasn't finished their evaluation. And with the rampant amount of flooding that went on, resources are strained. This flooding event may not have attracted that many flood adjusters to the area. So again, you're going to see a lot more adjusters working, a lot less adjusters working on a lot more claims. It wasn't a major hurricane. So it's too early to tell if there was adequate enough adjusters reporting to the area that are responding to these claims. But I can tell you that, and for those that we were representing, we've seen a pretty good flow of the claims earlier on. However, we do note that the inspections are more than 48, 72 hours out from when we're actually giving notice of their losses, which is somewhat a little bit unusual. And I believe it's because, again, there was not enough of flood adjusters coming to the area to actually provide an adequate, prompt response to these loss and damages. Again, a little too early to tell. We're only looking at what we have in front of us. We are reaching out to other professionals that do assist policyholders in the time of loss to see what their experience have had. So far, a few of them have reported back somewhat similar to the situation. So again, be patient. However, understand your obligations, because your obligations are not their obligations. Your obligations is a 60-day window unless the federal government extends that period of time for you to submit a sworn statement of proof of loss. But understand there's a difference if you got damaged on the 12th versus the 14th. And when that loss may have occurred because, again, the governor's order. Now, if you're in the Miramar area, you may have suffered hail damage. There was huge hail damage in that area. There were some reports of over 2-inch size hail that will damage a roof. Most any really roof surface, whether it's metal, concrete tile, clay tile, flat, there is clear evidence that hail of this size will damage a roof. So make sure that you are doing proper surveys of your roof. If you want assistance with us, reach out to us. We're available 24/7, 365 to policyholders to help you sort through what makes a claim and what makes a claim worth a recovery. And we want to make sure that you're doing a proper assessment of your situation so you know whether or not you need to notice your insurer of your loss and damages. Now, with the new guidelines that were filed last year, or the bill was approved and made into a law, as it relates to roofs, it's really important that you're doing a proper assessment and you're determining whether or not your roof can truly be repaired or replaced. Your insurance companies have lobbied for and successfully won legislation and laws that make it very confusing to determine whether the actual particular age of your roof, if you've repaired it. It only requires them to pay you in times for those repairs to your roof, despite the fact that basic construction and engineering principles that have been in place for decades said that you probably should replace your roof if 25% or more of your roof is damaged. The insurance companies went ahead and padded their profits and push for lobbyists to draft laws and lobby for initiatives that obviate those basic construction engineering principles. And in place of that, we have this confusing set of laws right now regarding age of roof that may be repaired or replaced, and how much of the repair or replacement you may be entitled to. And so again, it's tough to navigate. It's something that you need to be aware of. And don't just assume because you have a qualified roofer or a roofer you trust writing your reports that they understand the implications of these insurance laws. Because again, these insurance laws do not coincide with the basic construction and engineering principles that have been in place for decades. So if you're making a claim for your roof as it relates to hail damage, it's really important that you've had an insurance coverage expert look at your coverages, look at your claim, and work with you and your contractors if you've engaged a roofer to make sure that they are accurately and properly documenting the conditions of your property and giving prompt notice. That's not immediate notice. That's another thing about these flood losses as well as with these hail damages. The policies require prompt notice, not immediate notice. So to make sure you're doing proper assessments before giving the notice of these loss and damages. You don't want to say something to prejudice your entitlement to benefits and your claim. And believe me, we often see the statements of policyholders taken completely out of context and used against them when giving that first notice of claim. That's why we run a campaign called Call Us First. That's why we promote the idea of calling us first, because we want to help you give that notice. In fact, we would prefer to make that notice on your behalf because we are a licensed professional in insurance adjusting and we are experts in insurance coverage. We want to make sure that you're giving proper notice, you're giving prompt notice, but you also have done an assessment of what those damages are. The other thing that we've been seeing is tornadoes. Tornadic activity is typically isolated to a particular area. However, in and around a tornado, you have extreme weather conditions. You have additional winds, you have flying debris, you have a lot of lightning strikes within a tornado. It's a very violent weather event. And so you want to make sure that if you are in the immediate area from a tornado, that you also gone out and done a proper assessment. Just don't assume that because the tornado didn't roll right through your house or down the street or across the lake adjacent to your property that you did not sustain damage. If you're in the immediate area, it's important to get out there and look at it. Are your TV's operating properly? Is your microwaves or your and generally your electronics? Are you having issues with outlets? Those things are indicative. If you are having issues, that's indicative of some sort of lightning strike or surge or issue. But lightning strike is very different than surge. So again, particularly for commercial property that might have a boiler machinery policy and as well as a property insurance policy, maybe a non-windstorm event policy, et cetera, et cetera. As you can see, it can get complicated. You need to understand which policy to make that claim on and what constitutes a surge versus a lightning strike versus a tornado, flying debris issue, a windstorm, a non-windstorm event. Weather conditions is a provision in a lot of commercial policies as well as residential that we see that gets confusing when making these claims. So again, these are all important issues you need to be evaluating and things you need to be thinking about when making these types of claims. So we've had the flooding, we've had the hail, we've had the tornadoes. Guess what's right around the corner? Hurricane season. Now, I'm not saying all these things to be an alarmist. I'm saying these things because we truly want you to be prepared. We've been talking a lot about being prepared on a lot of these episodes of Recovery Report Live, and it's important that you understand that we are here as a resource to you as policyholders, as decision makers for your community association as well as your business, so you're making informed decisions and you're accurately and properly making notice of claims where there's a recovery. You're going out and doing the proper assessments. You're understanding that you have 60 days from the date that the loss occurred to make notice of, to actually submit your sworn statement proof of loss if there's a flood claim. Now again, if your flooding event and loss occurred on the 12th, well, it's 60 days from that date of loss. It's quite clear. The courts have been consistent on this. It's 60 days from that date. So getting back to flood losses, because there was a lot more people impacted by flood than there were hail and tornado, we really want to make sure that we're identifying when the flooding event occurred that caused damage to your property. Whether you're a community association, a business owner, or even a homeowner, this is going to be essential to the time frame in which you have to make a claim. So pay particular close attention to that. Do some research. Maybe you weren't home. Maybe this is a second or third home for you. Maybe you're a distant board member, meaning that you don't reside in the association property throughout the season, or maybe you're not in season right now for use of your unit. However, so communicating these things back to your community association manager, as well as your fellow board members, and even unit owners who may have been on site and watching things live as they transpired, is it going to be important to determining which date you're using to report your claim. And it's not enough to rely on your broker. And as we've talked about in prior episodes with other industry experts, insurance brokers and adjusters don't adjust. My apologies. Insurance agents, all right, and brokers don't adjust claims. Insurance agents and brokers don't adjust claims. So when you rely on your broker or agent to make your claim, you're most often in a commercial policy form, you're already doing the wrong thing. In fact, most commercial policies say in there that the policyholders to report those claims to a specific person or entity, and it's almost never the broker or the agent. So don't rely on your insurance agent or broker to accurately and promptly notice your claim. That's wrong. The notice, your obligation as a policy owner, your policy is to give that notice yourself to a specific entity or person. You can hire someone such as GlobalPro to represent your interest in a claim to make that notice for you. Insurance coverage experts such as us will make sure that we're giving the prompt notice and the proper notice to the correct insurance companies as well, where we believe there is a recovery, where you may be entitled to certain benefits under those policies. Don't just broadly make notice of the claim to all the insurers. That's not a good tactic either. That's giving erroneous notice, and possibly erroneous claims will appear on your loss run, which will impact you down the road. Because if you have a high frequency in making claims, well, it's going to be tougher to get insurance. It may not necessarily cost you more money, but you may not be attractive to a particular insurer. In a tough market like this, we want to make sure that you have accurate information reflected in your loss runs. So don't give broad notice to these things. Don't rely on your broker agent to give that notice, because you need to be very specific as to when that loss occurred, and also making sure that you've done some sort of assessment of what is going on at your property, what damages you believe you're going to be making, so that when you give that notice, you've given enough general detail to set the reserves on your claim at the insurance company so that they have adequate reserves in order to pay your losses and damages. All of these things go into the process, and I know it's difficult and it's complicated and it's a mouthful, believe me. I'm sitting here for many minutes now discussing and talking about all the different things and thinking about all the different things that I want to talk about as we're doing these things. I'm not going off of notes. I'm going off the top of mind. I'm going off based on a decade or more experience in managing more than $1 billion in loss here at GlobalPro. Tens of thousands of claims have come through this office. Sadly, a number of those come to our office because of the inaccuracies in the way things have been reported. Most often, those inaccuracies, sadly, are because of the brokers or agents that reported the claims on behalf of policyholders, despite them selling a product that they may know, and I can't say they know, but they should know, in it requires that the policyholder give notice to a specific entity or company directly. And they should not be the ones giving that notice on your behalf. That's not their role in this process. Their role in this process is to sell you a product, is not to adjust a claim. In fact, they're not going to adjust a claim. So relying on them to give that notice to the proper place and to provide the adequate or the necessary information that insurance company will rely on, again, you're taking a big chance here. You're taking a big chance, and when you have significant losses as a fiduciary, as a board member, or a property manager, or even a business owner, you're taking a chance that you may prejudice the financial interests of those that are relying on you, whether it's your investors, whether it's your fellow unit owners. So don't take that chance. Make sure that you have an insurance-covered expert on your side. Call us. Let us know. Check us out online at globalpro.com. Shoot us a DM on Instagram or message us on Facebook, or by whatever means you need to contact us, whatever you use in your daily routine to reach out to vendors or people you need help with. We are on all our social media platforms. We're on YouTube. We're on the web. We're wherever we can to get in front of people, to give them the information they need to make sure they're making informed decisions, to make sure that they have access to competent representation. So With that being said, and if you haven't already, like us and follow us on all the social media. We want to make sure that you have the information you can use every single week. That's what this entire broadcast is about. If you haven't already, go to GlobalPro.com, check out the resource section. There's a lot of downloadable information there, particularly about hail and flood and a few other things. But we're constantly putting out information on all our social media. So as I've said already a few times, make sure you're liking and following us in there so you get the notification when we go live here in the Recovery Report, as well as when we make our next post with information that I guarantee you is going to be of value to you. Particularly if you're a property manager or a business owner or a board member, we're doing all kinds of educational seminars lately to make sure that you have information, that you're informed of the changes that are coming. And a lot of changes are coming. We're in the middle of session here in Florida, and it's important that you understand what those changes are going to be and what they mean to you in your community or your business. So again, like us and follow us on all the social media. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're going to be right here, same place, same time on the Recovery Report Live next week at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I thank you for everyone that has tuned into us this week. It's been a tough week here in South Florida with all the storm events. So is there anything that we can do? Again, please reach out to us. Let us know that we can do to help you. And thank you all for tuning in again this week on the Recovery Report Live.